Everybody, welcome to Soul Cafe. It's so great to see you. We hope you had a great holiday. It was nice, I think. Aaron, don't you think to have a week off last week?
It was. It was
Yeah,
really nice. Yeah.
I love Soul Cafe, but it
Yes.
was it was good to have the night off. Although I lost track of the week when that happened.
Yeah.
There's so few things now
Yep.
that mark your week. So for me, it's teaching on Sunday, Soul Cafe.
Right.
There might be one or two other things.
Yeah.
So when I'm out of place and we're not doing this, the first week I kept track because we did this where I was, and then I lost track.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Oh, you were also on vacation, so it's
yeah,
easier
I
to
was. I was. That's true. That,
yeah.
you spoken truth there, but I'm not anymore. So
Not anymore. You're back today.
all over, back to the
Sad about it?
no. I was ready to come home. I was
Well, that's
ready
good.
ready to be back and excited about a couple of things that we have upcoming. So let me mention one of them. So we
Yeah.
start a new sermon series this weekend for those of you Colombians who are here. It's going to be really fun. It's Aaron. It's called Mediator, and so the tagline is "Discovering the Hidden Power Within," and it's got a superhero kind of a theme to it. So I think you'll see we're going to have some prop stuff going
Yeah.
on, and yeah, I think your kids will enjoy it. I think you'll enjoy it, but
Yeah.
anyway, it's going to be
Look
a
forward
whole
to
lot
it.
of fun. So
Yeah.
that's going to be cool. And we've been trying to think of new topics and new things that we could talk about. And one came to me this week, and I got to tell you how it happened. So I'm going to set this up by telling you that I have just spent some time in a whole different part of the world. So you've left the area, right? You've gone, didn't you go to the Outer Banks or something, Virginia Beach
No.
or?
I did go. Where did I go? I'm losing track. Oh, I went down to Virginia Beach. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know if it was different there. So you've got plans to go to the Outer Bank, right?
Yep.
So that's going to be different. So let me tell you, when you cross the North Carolina line, the whole way people are treating the virus, the pandemic, is entirely different. It's completely different.
Yeah.
And really, I'm guessing once you get out of Northern Virginia, that we
Yeah.
live in something of a little bubble
Yep.
of people who are maybe have a different educational experience, think a little differently. I don't know, but man, it was just so there's a face mask mandate in North Carolina.
Right.
The
Yeah.
governor there,
Out
yeah,
anywhere, right?
right. Well, not outside, but any building that you walk into, you're
Okay.
supposed to wear a face mask. Okay, so they don't. And
Yeah.
not only do they not, but they resent people who do. And
Right.
this is not everybody,
Right.
but a lot of people.
Right.
And this was really interesting to me, just the completely different attitude about distancing and face masks and that kind of thing, which I
Yeah.
know that there's a political pushback and I understand that, but this was more of a pervasive cultural
Yeah.
sort of a this was the norm. And if you were to abide by what the governor was asking, you went against the norm.
Right.
So what I found was I was walking into like a food line close to we always shop at the same little place that's close to our beach place. And there you had to have the face mask on to get in the front door. So people would wear it in. And then as soon as they'd get past the front, they just pull it down around their neck.
Right. Right.
And the aisles are supposed to be one way and no way, and
Right.
people would absolutely walk right up to you and pick up a peach right beside where you're picking up a peach, and it was freaky for me because I've been in this bubble here
Right.
for this period of time. So going to the beach at Sunset Beach, North Carolina, the beach is a long way from the houses by design and plan. So there are actually two big layers of sand dunes and a huge open area, a wetland between. It stands hurricanes really well. It's got a lot of sand on the beach, unlike most East Coast beaches. It's not disappearing. It's really by design that way. So when you walk down these paths, which are supposed to be one way, but they weren't. People were
Right.
coming both ways. You're going to pass pretty close to a lot of people. And
Mhm.
so I thought, well, the thing to do probably is to mask going down there and back, not on the beach because it's a
Right.
huge beach. You can spread out. There's an uninhabited island next door. It's pretty easy to get away. But going down and going back. So day two, we're there with some good friends of ours that live actually in North Carolina now, and Debbie and our two friends, they were coming behind me because I had to park about a block away. So I said, "I'll go get the car, come get you guys."
Right.
So I walked past this big group of people a family, maybe, I don't know, under a pavilion, like,
Right.
everybody has on the back of the beach. And I just walk past, don't pay any attention, get onto the path. Well, they're far enough behind me to hear what's being said about me after I pass. So after I pass, this whole big clan is going, stranger danger, stranger. Basically, it was shunning me
Right.
for wearing the mask.
Right.
So the fact that I was masked to them was a sign of what? I don't know. Uh,
Like an
but
affront or something.
whatever the case, it just, I said to my wife, it's fascinating to me,
Right.
because the irony, of course, is that my mask is protecting them more than it
Right.
is me.
Right.
So my mask protects you, yours protects me, yada yada. So I started thinking about all the cultural norms around face masks. And while this has been put into a political lens, I just started looking up article after article after article if I could read about the physiology, the psychology, and the sociology of face masking. And then I texted you because I
Yep.
said, Aaron, this would be a fascinating thing to get a couple of people in the room to talk about. So you thought it was a good idea. So what do you think about all this before we get people in the room?
I'm a little all over the map on it.
Yeah.
I I understand the purpose of masks and I wear them when I'm inside because that's what I'm asked to do. I've been a little bit more perturbed by how much that offers people a little bit of a false sense of security. So I
Hmm.
find people being a lot closer,
Hmm.
a lot more like, you know, just sneezing blindly into the mask as opposed to like what we were always taught, like things like almost feeling like it is truly a shield, which it's not. So I'm almost, I have run into situations where I have been like, why are you even wearing it if that's how you're going to behave
Well,
wearing
here's
it?
here's the good
But
news for
plenty
you.
of other times I get
When
it.
you get down south, here's the good news. They're
Yeah.
not going to do either.
Yeah.
Distance or mask. So you won't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
So
But
anyway,
I mean, I wear it
yeah,
when
it's
I have to,
fascinating.
but I take it off the minute I get out of a building. I mean, I don't wear it when I'm running around or
Of
walking
course not. No,
outside.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I no, I'm not going to wear it walking down the street by myself. Not
Yeah.
going to do that. But it is more normative here though.
Oh,
So
for sure it is. Yeah.
and therefore, not as much stigma attached.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I tried to think of a couple of people we could talk to in Columbia, members of our congregation, and Barry Byers always an interesting guest, and so Barry give us a little of the physiology. I think though Barry can talk about anything, so he's
Well, and
listening,
and
and
he was
he's a good
on the
friend.
very first episode we talked about Corona back in
Right.
February, and we actually talked about masks
So
then.
we're bringing him back,
Yeah.
and then Jason Steele, who is a counselor and a really great guy. Both of these are great guys in our congregation, who I always find is a keen observer of human nature and talking about the sociology of things. And
Right.
so he's just, whenever I talk to him, I just think he's a great observation. So I thought it'd be fun just if you and I had a conversation with them.
Yeah.
And so you got to think up some good questions, though. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
All
be
right.
working on this.
Pressure. Pressure.
That's a little pressure. So before we do that, let's bring in Aaron, the other Aaron, to
Aaron.
sing a song for us. And let me, I said I wasn't going to do this, but let me show this up front just so people have it. So people like to take our polls, Aaron. And so this is somebody's already jumped in. That's Gus Mancuso. He always does this before anybody else. I'm telling you, before anybody else gets on. So I'm going to ask you two questions by poll tonight. You can respond at pollev.com, Jim Balkum 277, or you can text Jim Balkum 277 to 22333, and then you'll be entered and you can respond with the appropriate letter. And that's always the case. It's always the same. So while Aaron is singing, you guys jump on and answer this poll. Give us some sense of it. So I'm going to ask you how you feel about wearing a mask yourself. And by the way, I don't have your name. I don't know who you are, so you can say whatever you want. And then I'm going to ask you, how do you feel about others wearing it? So here's the first poll, Aaron. It's how do you feel about wearing a face mask? A, it's no big deal. Happy to do it. B, I don't like it, but I'm willing. C, only if I have to. D, you can't make me. And E, no how, no way. So, Aaron, you're not, I don't know if you're going to log in and take that or not, but what would you say here? What's your answer?
I'm probably between B and C.
Between B and C. So, don't like it, but you're willing
Yeah. I
some
mean,
days,
and
and
then
then
where I have to, I have
other days only if you have to. Okay. Everybody got this really quick. Okay. So, take this while we bring Aaron into the room, and I don't know what he's going to sing for us tonight, but when I told him this topic, he said he had an appropriate song.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
So
can't wait to find out what that is.
well, right. Who knew there
Yeah.
was a face mask song, right? So, Aaron, am I right? Did you have an appropriate song for this topic?
Not at all.
Oh.
In fact, you used the word appropriate. I just used the word a song.
Okay. Well, I've got the text right here. You said I've got the perfect thing for it, or something like that.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, that's disappointing, but I'll take whatever you give us, man.
That was a face mask pattern I think he was talking
Yeah.
about.
I don't know how we can. Maybe after I sing the song, we can figure out how it applies to wearing masks.
Yeah.
We'll sort of like reverse engineer it or something like that.
You know what you could do is you could like write a song on the spot for this, just right there.
Oh man.
No, we'll take the song you've been planning to sing.
All right. So this one is one I've been working on. I told you I was taking guitar lessons, and so I've been taking bluegrass guitar lessons with a guy who actually just got nominated for the International Bluegrass Musicians Association Guitarist Award for this year, which is pretty cool. So anyway, none of that rubbed off on me, but I've been learning lots of bluegrass licks, so I'm trying to incorporate them into my song. So this one is called "Come Early Morning," and it's by Don Williams.
All right.
All right.
I've been walking in the moonlight, tripping in the starlight, Lord, and I'm feeling down. Walking in the shadows, sneaking down the side road. Come early morning, I'll be there at the edge of town. Well, I wasn't thinking about a good thing, thinking about a sweet gleam blue in my honey's eyes. I was a sinking, feeling kind of lonesome. Early morning, I'll be home at my honey's side. I have drifted up across the mountain, and I have stumbled down the other side. I've been tempted, tried and troubled. Come early morning, I'll be home and satisfied. She give me a little loving, give me a little sunshine, make me have a good time, Lord, when I'm feeling blue. I couldn't refuse her, well, I couldn't misuse her. Come early morning, I'll be home with my honeydew. I had drifted up across the mountain, and I had stumbled down the other side. I've been tempted, tried and troubled. Come early morning, I'll be home and satisfied. Come early morning, I'll be home and satisfied.
That's awesome, man. Actually, that's a good song. I don't think it had anything to do with face mask, but I really I really liked it. It's a good piece.
I love it. It's nice and
It was good.
Yeah. It's got
So,
a nice
Aaron-
country twang to it. Yeah. What's up?
Aaron, how about you? So I've heard you talk a lot about you mask. So
I do.
Yeah, when
Ask
you
even on
come-
stage, yeah.
well, when he's on stage, even you do, and I've heard you talk a lot about this. So you were in the green room listening to me set up this topic. So what do you think about all this?
I think so. I saw the same thing. We went to Smith Mountain Lake about 2 weeks ago, and it was the same kind of thing. It's like people look at you kind of funny when you're wearing the mask. You know, it's not the cultural norm. I think that it's tragic, actually, is the word I would use, because if people actually just wore the mask and stopped worrying about whether it doesn't trap every single virus, particle or whatever, we would probably have far fewer fatalities by this point. and we could have a more vibrant economy if people just wore the mask, because you can go out and you can go into stores and do things like that. Just wear the mask and stay separate, and it just eases everything on everybody. So the whole thing that it's become a cultural thing just makes me mad. So
Yeah,
I'll
well,
try to say that
it
with a
is
smile.
intriguing that it's become a political football. I think that's an interesting lens through which to see this.
Yeah.
But I remember you saying in one of our services you thought that it was an ethical issue for you almost. I'm not saying that needs to be for everybody, but for you, I think your point was I think you called it a justice issue, that
Yeah.
that it was part of your concern for others.
Absolutely. That's why I wear it, because I know that it's not necessarily going to do anything for me. And when I'm walking by people who aren't wearing them and are standing too close, I know that I'm much more likely to acquire the virus from them than they would be from me, just because I was wearing it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you doing well?
I'm doing great. Yeah.
It's great to see
I love
you.
the summertime.
I do too. Well, I do this year especially. I think being able to get out into your yard or onto your deck or onto your front porch or whatever you do makes you feel a little less claustrophobic. So
it's the back porch for me. I've been doing coffee on the back porch every morning, and it's just been delightful.
Aaron has too, right, Aaron? Coffee with the construction workers.
95-degree heat with the construction workers. I tried it one time in my PJs thinking it was fine, and then I noticed they were really close to the fence line, and I thought there's probably something slightly inappropriate about this. I'm going to go back inside. And I should say my pajamas are from ankle to neck, so there's nothing. But still, it just felt a little too intimate to be reading my paper and having my coffee, hearing a construction guy waving at him. Hi,
hey guys, good morning.
Would you like some coffee?
How's the work coming back there?
It's pretty close to being ready for them to, I think, put the pavement down. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
They've been pounding on it. So like our house legitimate, we're getting a little bit of a reprieve. We're going to house sit for 6 days, so we get to like get away from the noise for a couple of days. So I'm excited.
That's probably a good time to do that.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for it. Was that? Did you have 2 or is it 1 tonight?
That was just one.
Okay, I thought you told me. I thought you told me 1, but I did. Based
one
on
appropriate song or
yeah.
2.
Well, I was still open for a face mask song. So anyway, that's no, that was awesome. Thanks so much for doing it.
Thank you guys.
So thank you, and hey, have a great week, and we'll see you next time you're on
Soul
Cafe. All right,
Let's
man.
do it. All right.
Okay.
Take care, guys.
All right, so let's bring our friends in and begin our conversation if you want
Okay.
to. So I'll let you launch the questions here in a minute. So,
Oh goodness.
well, you're used to interviewing Barry. And
I am.
He's easy to interview.
I feel like I should, but I should be like, yeah, you were 2 weeks ago. This was your topic, my friend.
Yeah, it was my topic, but I always help you when it's your topic.
I'm gonna move to.
So guys, first of all, while you're here, I don't know if I think you could see this offline, but let's see what the poll actually has been moving a lot. It's just nobody answered D or E. So 38% say no big deal to them. 54% say they don't like it, but they're willing. Hey, Sharon. And then C, only if I have to. 8% say only if they have to. And so we'll come back to that later and see what they're saying. And I have another poll we'll ask in the middle of this. But you guys, we've read some articles together, and maybe I'll let Aaron ask a good physiology question to Barry, because Barry, you can help us with the why face masks. So how would you put that, Aaron?
Well, I mean, I also just think it's cool to have you at this point, given, gosh, was it 5 months ago now? 4 months ago? You were on our very first panel for Soul Cafe when we were still doing in person Soul Cafe. And at that time we were talking a lot about like the supplies, and most people were only talking about masks in relation to N95 masks. So that was the biggest issue, why they weren't necessarily pushing masks and telling people not to wear them, because we needed the supply. So, given now that we're okay with fabric masks, what are your, how do you look at it? How are you helping to explain to folks from a doctor's perspective the benefit of the cloth masks versus what we started out thinking we needed, which were N95s and respirators and all these types of things?
Well, I think there are just so many studies now that have shown that any face covering makes a difference. Of course, the N95, which are really not recommended for the general public. They're not available anyway. They're still in short supply. But
Right.
masks make an enormous difference. You're talking about a highly contagious infectious disease with a very high morbidity and mortality, which means you get sick. Some people stay sick for a long time. Some people stay sick permanently. There's a high mortality rate.
Right.
And in spite of that, some people just don't seem to either believe or feel 100% comfortable with masks. But they're
But
important.
by the way, Barry, I think I'm right about this. You know, I think when many of us hear 2%, 3%, something like that, we think, oh, that's low morbidity. That's actually for a virus, pretty high morbidity.
It's extremely high.
Yeah, when it's so easily conferred to other people. And also, what we're finding, and I can prove this by people I know, friends and people in our church, is lots of people don't die of it, but man, the consequences are even for young people
Mhm.
can be long and difficult months of recovery. So it does seem to me like something we'd want to avoid. Some of the articles we read, I don't know what you're reading, Barry, but one of the estimates was that we could prevent at least 25% of cases with face masks. So cutting something like this by a quarter, it's pretty big. Here are a couple of other numbers. We could eliminate, according to the University of Washington, that respected study, 33,000 deaths between now and October 1st if everyone in America wore a face mask. 33,000 people is a lot. And here's one that I found particularly interesting, and one of the things that stoked my interest in this is Goldman Sachs has said that face masking the general public, everybody in the country, would save us 5% of our GDP in the coming 2 years. 5%. That's big, huge
Yeah.
numbers. So,
Those
so
are.
Barry, tell somebody, why should we be doing this?
Well, you get sick. For older people, I'm sure you've all heard, everybody knows that the mortality and the morbidity is much worse with people with certain chronic illnesses and people that are older. The face mask there are just very few things you can do to prevent it. You can isolate yourself. That's difficult, but it's something that is best you can. But washing your hands, the face masks, social distancing are really, really important. It's very troublesome to me when we definitely live in a bubble here in Northern Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
When I go for a little walk outside, I'm on the sidewalk or on a path, and somebody's coming toward me, they walk off the path. They want to stay more than 6 feet away from me. And, I hear stories, and you've related these stories, Jim, of other places and people in other cities which are not doing that. It's hard for me to take it in and understand that. It's, to me, wearing a mask is a responsibility, and it's no different from when we have law. And I think the mandate to wear a mask should be there. I think the governor and those in power have that. We have mandates about drunk drivers. We have mandates about if you go into, or just systems, if you go camping and you have to relieve yourself, there's certain protocols. Well, when you cough and sneeze, there's a protocol. But with this particular condition, the seriousness is such where the mandate has come forth from some in power to wear a mask. To me, it seems very reasonable because it's been shown clearly over and over in numerous studies to make a difference. So I don't quite get it. I don't understand. I'm looking forward to what Jason has to say and what the psychological principles are here, because logic, to me, I don't like it. I'm sort of like Aaron. I mean, why would I possibly like wearing a mask?
Right.
I don't like it at all, but I do it because I feel I'm protecting myself maybe a little bit, but it's just so irresponsible to drive when you're drunk. To me, it's irresponsible if I have it, and I may have it, who knows? And if I cough and sneeze and someone gets it, it's the same. To me, they're equal.
So I have a question about physicality, only because, so one thing, I was talking to my asthma doctor the other day. So I'm strictly a nose breather. I don't ever, in fact, it's like, that's why it's really hard for me to get congested, because I can't breathe through my mouth very well. But so I tend to, sometimes if I'm talking, I'll pull it down and I have it covering my mouth, but I'm curious because it's droplets, right? That this disease is spread by. Do you exhale through your nose just by breathing?
You can exhale through
I mean, you
your nose.
exhale, but particle, like droplets, or is that?
Oh yeah,
It's
it can
like,
come through your nose, or the only two places it's going to come out. It's either going to come out of your nose or your mouth. It's the same.
yeah.
So if you
Well, but your nose
sneeze,
has
you
the
could sneeze
cilia.
with your mouth open and you'll expel far more
Yeah.
particles.
Oh, I
Okay.
mean, like if you're just breathing, are there
If
droplets
most people
coming out of your
breathe through their
nose?
nose, I
Yeah.
think, and it's there's stuff coming out all the time, particles, vapor, and it's not just the droplets you read about. There's an aerosol. The droplets, all the studies show that's where they came up with the 6 feet. That they'll fall to the ground over a period of time. It
Right.
depends on the temperature, humidity. But the aerosols, which are much smaller, they are not affected as much by gravity, or not at all.
Right.
So when you cough or sneeze, there's some big droplets, there's some medium-sized droplets, there's some tiny, tiny droplets, and then there's this aerosol. And
Right.
the aerosol is a big problem because you have these small droplets. They're not droplets, it's called aerosol. It's
Right.
throughout the air, it gets throughout the room, it just keeps floating around, it's there all the time. So if you go to a restaurant and somebody sneezes and they're a little distance away, it's going to make its way over to you. It depends on, what the airflow is,
Right.
how many people are walking
or
around.
even breathes or talks loud
Right, breathe,
or
talk loud,
singing's a
Yes.
problem.
singing's a nightmare.
Um,
Yeah.
so Barry, actually, you've brought up something that's pretty new. So I read a lot, and in the last several weeks, there has been a completely different designation. In fact, they're trying to get WHO to change their designation now because the latest research shows that this is not spread only by droplets.
Right.
It is an aerosolized infection, meaning it's in the air. That's really different, isn't it? It makes the mask more important.
It makes the mask more important because the mask will help with that also. So
Right.
anything you can do to keep the droplet count down and the aerosol down is going to make a difference. You'll have fewer viral particles floating around.
2 articles we read, I sent you guys, I think about 16 articles or something like that. One of them actually made that comparison, and maybe that's what you're referencing here. One of the, I think it was actually a Republican commentator who was saying that not wearing a mask is like driving drunk to them. It's the same concept. I don't not drive drunk just to protect myself. I do it not to, I do it to protect others. And this person said, if you know that you can protect others by doing this, it's that kind of an issue for them. So maybe that's what you're referencing.
Mm.
And then there was another piece that was fascinating. I thought you'd find it fascinating anyway. Dr. Hill in North Carolina, no less, did a battery of studies to try to debunk some of the myths of mask wearing.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the myths? The myths are you're inhaling your own CO2, that it actually lowers oxygen levels, that if you have any kind of a lung illness or whatever, you should not wear a mask. And she sets out to debunk all of these and basically test the oxygen of people, including herself, while they're wearing different kinds of masks. So did you read that article and
Yeah,
find it fascinating?
I had heard that, but I hadn't read that article. That it was very interesting. I think she did a good study, and it just again underscores the masks work, and they don't really affect your oxygenation of your blood. What she did was she checked her PO2 and those little meters you can put on your finger, and it tells your oxygen level. And it made no difference if she had a mask on, any type of mask.
Right. At
She
all.
even layered up. She wore 2 masks at once
Oh yeah, so
and
there you
still
go.
no impact.
Watch out for scientists, man. She just goes to the extreme to make her point, but she
You
made a
can
point.
you
Yeah.
can use science. You can really demolish
You know what it
some of these
reminds me of,
myths.
though? You remember seatbelts? When now I think all of us are old enough, maybe Jason, you may not be, to remember when seatbelts were, and maybe not even you, Aaron, but I remember vividly when seatbelts became the law. So I was a teenager when that happened. And as you may remember, there were all sorts of arguments against wearing seatbelts, and basically they were saying it was just as dangerous or more so to wear a seatbelt than it was not to, because you get trapped in your car.
Right.
Thus ushered in all the state troopers and others who would say things like, "I've never unbuckled a dead man." I'll never forget that was what I heard in my my driver's ed course. But it's similar, isn't it? Something is mandated, at least some places. Something's expected, and there's a backlash of personal freedom of a sort. And then I think once we feel a certain way, we seek to justify with an alternative set of facts. And so this is very much like that seatbelt argument when people say, well, my CO2 will go up, or I have breathing problems or anxiety issues, or whatever the thing may be. So Barry, anything else you'd offer before we pull Jason in? And you can jump in anytime, but
Yeah, let's hear from Jason. I mean, I have more, but I want to give
well,
Jason
you're
the
gonna have
floor
time. You're
because
gonna have time here because we still got a half an hour. So Jason, I've just always found you to be a keen observer of human beings and human nature, including your own nature, which helps a lot. Um, I've heard you talk a little bit about this issue, and also I think you, like I, find it fascinating how people are responding to the whole face mask thing. So help us understand, both based on what we've read together and what you know about people that you counsel and other people. Why do you think we would resist something like a face mask? What are the sociological and psychological reasons that we would?
Well, I would start with saying we're not rational.
What?
We're emotional, and I spend all the time talking with people about somebody else in their life. They're like, why can't they just do this? Why can't they just do that? And it boils down to you have to expect them to be as they are, not how you think they ought to be, or not what's rational. Because you can look at them and say, rational, rational. But you need to look at yourself and say, how many times are you actually behaving rationally in the moment? Lots of times not. A perfect analogy that we haven't brought up yet is smoking and secondhand smoke. How many years did it take before there were laws that said you couldn't smoke, like in restaurants and stuff like that, to prevent secondhand smoke,
Or an
you know,
airplane?
or an airplane,
I
right?
remember flying when everybody was
And
smoking.
and you knew scientifically, you knew without a shadow of a doubt that smokers were killing other people slowly with their secondhand smoke. That's an example of the illogic of the way we function. You know, I want to do it, or I don't like doing that. And so I come up with a reason, I justify. And it's just something about the way we're made. We're very, very, very self centered all the time, no matter what. So one of the problems with saying my mask protects you is I don't really care about you. you know,
It's
I care
sad,
about me.
sad to think,
And
but
it is. It is. It really is. And another sort of pile onto that is if you make me feel guilty about not caring about you, I'm going to more aggressively not care about you because I don't want to hear you say that. And that makes me feel bad. And I don't like feeling bad because we all want to feel like good people. You
so
know?
what about y- you know one of the things that it was pointed out in the articles I found fascinating was that the way we read people, and especially the way we read strangers, is by their facial features and expressions first and foremost. So if we walk into a crowd of strangers, we immediately size people up based on what their faces look like, the expressions on their face, the signals they're sending us. And when we are masked, that covers that makes people look more fearful to us and makes us feel like we look more fearful to others. I found that intriguing. In fact, that National Geographic article was really well done, which laid out a lot of research about that. So, what would you say about that? So, for example, just one little piece again. We tend to convey a lot of emotion about anger in our mouths, so people can't tell if they can't see our mouths whether we're angry or not.
Mhm.
What would you say about that?
There are a lot, like a major, major segment of the population deals with anxiety. And subset within that is people who experience trauma, particularly growing up. So if you grow up for several years in a situation where you at least felt like your life depended on knowing whether somebody was angry,
Yeah.
you're going to deeply, deeply feel a need to
Mm.
know what is that person feeling? What are the people around me feeling? And especially, are they feeling any of these negative emotions like anger or something related to that? So I don't think that most people are going to be really aware of this, but I think a lot of people are going to feel a lot of fear going around seeing people in masks. It's going to make them feel super unsafe. And they're not really even going to know why. They're just going to be creeped out, you know.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, you know, it's not like it's going to be a majority of people, but it's going to be a really big minority of people.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I've spent a lot of time in the last few weeks in and out of medical facilities. Nothing's wrong. But where I had to wear masks. And I realized that I had to start thinking about how I was going to, was I going to gasp? Like, how was I going to let them know if I was scared or like, ouch, you're hurting me? I was just in today getting a lovely mammogram. And I literally had to go, okay, Erin, like breathe in or make a sound or something, because she's not going to know when I'm too uncomfortable. And I'm not used to, you know, you're used to like wincing and someone picks it up. The doctors are used to looking for those types of signs to see if you're uncomfortable. So aside from like being fearful of other people, there's just also a lot of things that I've, you know, in stores and stuff like that, it hasn't bothered me as much, but in medical environments where I'm relying on someone not to hurt me or to scare me or something like that, it's definitely, those were the times when I was the most freaked out, also because everybody else is masked up around me with screens everywhere, and it's like just a fearful environment that you're just like, "Ah."
You're nervous and you want more information to make your environment more predictable.
Right. And you don't want them to miss the information you're giving.
Yeah, because you want to communicate. You want them to know.
You poked me and that hurt.
We all know nonverbal communication is a bigger chunk of what we're putting out there than our actual words.
Yeah.
And you know, you're communicating all the time, even when you're not talking.
Yeah.
The fascinating thing for me is to realize, and I've done this more because I'm kind of focused on communicating with people, that if what's his name, Dr. Ekman, he did a lot of research on facial and emotions and how you express emotions in your face, and they are all expressed, you know, above the mask line, not as obviously, not nearly as obviously, but you can.
Right.
You can. It's harder. I mean, one of the things I had to learn as a counselor, I'm trying to counsel people telehealth now for a few months, and I have to pay a lot more attention and be a lot more focused to get all the cues that I need to get to really understand and read people and respond appropriately. It's there, you can get it, but it's harder.
Right.
And we're not used to it. And so I think that creates a lot of anxiety.
Wasn't Dr. Ekman, wasn't he the one that did the thing that showed that even babies, the first thing they could do was read people's emotions? The first skill we have to read people is their facial features. Was that the same, in that same body of work?
I'm not sure if he did that. He started out by saying, do we express our emotions regardless of culture or language or nationality? So he went literally all over the world, and he even found people that hadn't been really connected to society, you know, these really primitive tribes. And he would check, you know, okay, do this emotion, do that emotion. And he had a really robust study, and he found, didn't matter who you were, didn't matter where you grew up, didn't matter if you never saw television or anybody else, you still do the same things with your face, feel those same emotions. And so
Universal.
It's universal.
So the flip side of that would be, wouldn't it, that I also would be afraid potentially to mask because of how I might be perceived by others. So if that is frightening to me, then it may be a behavior that I want to avoid because I might be seen as a dangerous person or a stranger.
Well, and that's an intersection between the pandemic and the racial tensions. There are actually a lot of people of color who have felt uncomfortable or reluctant to wear a mask because they have felt like people are going to make even more assumptions about my intent, negative assumptions about my intent. And I want to be able to really show that I'm fine, there's nothing going on here, I'm not angry, you know, to kind of keep people from acting badly to me. And so that's another piece of this. That's another reason why people are like, that just makes me feel uncomfortable.
Erin, I thought about film stereotypes across generations and comic book heroes. So look, if good guys cover their faces, what do they cover? They cover their eyes.
Yeah.
With one exception I can think of. I know there's one superhero that covers other, but it's usually your eyes, right? So the Lone Ranger or whatever. It was funny that President Trump talked about the Lone Ranger because the Lone Ranger doesn't cover his mouth; he covers his eyes. Right. The bad guys always cover their mouth. Think about it.
Yeah.
And I just thought about the implications across the years of this, and I think I can see why it feels so weird to us, and it does feel strange to me. I got to tell you, especially if I'm in an environment where others aren't doing it. So if everybody is, then it feels different. Around here, if I'm in a store, and it's expected. Yeah, in fact, I'm going to get a terrible look if I'm not wearing a face mask in a store here.
Yes.
But when I was in another place where most people didn't want to or weren't, and looked at me funny because I was, it was a totally different feeling.
Mhm.
Really fascinating.
And in those places, I think one of the other psychological things that's happening is if I don't acknowledge it, it doesn't exist.
Mm.
You know, the very, very, very old trope of the ostrich with his head in the sand.
Mm.
You know, I mean, one of the things I run into in sessions is if I don't put it into words,
It
then
didn't
it's
happen.
not as real. But if I say it out loud, wait, it hits me harder. Suddenly it's more real. Suddenly I really feel it. Suddenly I've admitted something. You know, I knew it all along, but I put it into words and, it's psychological magic, I guess you could call it.
Mhm.
But it really is true.
Mm.
And so one of the things I think is playing into this, I mean, I think it's a significant factor. It's not the only one. But yeah, if we all don't wear masks and we all pretty much act like we always did, then this doesn't really exist and we're all fine.
Mhm.
And so then I've completely short circuited, cut off all that stress and anxiety that I don't want to deal with, that I don't want to feel. Because we as a human race are really super avoidant of anxiety and
Jason,
anything that makes us.
I have a question. What are your feelings about, or how would you explain the regional differences, in this country or even in this state, and also um, people ignoring respected medical opinions? It's not just the CDC, it's not just the American Medical Association, the American Hospital Association, the American Nurses Association, and all these universities. They're all saying, all these prestigious universities are all saying it's the same message. How do you walk away from that message, which to me is like, gee, that must be true? How could it not be? How could they all be wrong? You have other people with a different message, but they don't have the credentials. They have another message like this. I want to do this, or I'm not doing that. So how do you explain that stuff? I don't get it. I really
Uh,
don't get it.
if I were to oversimplify, I would say it's because I don't know any of those people.
Yeah.
I never met them. I don't know them. How can I trust them? You know, I mean, one of the things that's happened in our world is you're bombarded with information. You know, if you open the door to it, you can have information just showering over you 24/7. And so the natural filtering that we always do with our senses, right? You walk out the door and there's a zillion things happening and you're only paying attention to the thing you're doing. So you already have that very robust skill of filtering for information. And now we're doing it with everything.
Yeah.
You know, there's a zillion people talking to me. So just the fact that you can put that word in my ear doesn't mean jack to me. You know, if I don't want to believe it, I don't have to believe it because I can find somebody else saying something different, you know? And I think that connects us to one of the old logical fallacies, confirmation bias. You know, if I believe it's a certain way, then I can find a reason to keep believing that, you know?
Yeah.
And so then that allows me to avoid feeling really anxious and upset and like there's a serious problem and I might die. So I want to do that too, you know?
Yeah.
I'm talking to people all day long about, hey, you're going to be better if you face this than if you keep trying to run away from it.
Let me throw up real quick. First of all, this poll that we've been doing, but also I've got one more that I think you guys might want to comment on a little bit. So this has been constantly moving, even though what's been moving primarily are A and B competing with one another. A few people have said C apparently, but no big deal to some people. Most people around here are saying I don't like it, but I'm willing. I think I could poll a different audience and get a really different response to this. But then I also was curious about this. So how do you feel about others wearing a face mask? Um, what's your sense of whoops, I just messed that up. What's your sense of what others should do? So first of all, A, if you care, you will wear a face mask. B, I really appreciate it. C, it doesn't matter to me. D, it bothers me if you wear a face mask, that is. And E, if you're healthy, you just shouldn't. So if you don't, if you're healthy, and that's, by the way, been one of the interesting things too. One of the articles that we read fit into that love your neighbor category, which is that if we all mask, we will cause those who have to mask to feel less ostracized. So Barry, you're in an age bracket where you need to mask and distance.
Correct.
Yeah. So, and I care about you. So if I'm in an audience with you and you need to wear a mask to be there, and I wear one too, then it's a way of my saying, me too. It's all of us together. And of course, people who are going through things like chemotherapy, I think of some good friends of ours in the congregation who are very young, but who are going through chemotherapy, and they will need to mask. So one of the articles pointed out that we need to create a new social context in which we show that everybody can be okay and fit in. So Jason, what would you make of that one? The duty we do, that we're saying everybody's okay if we participate in a safe activity like that.
Yeah, we need to be together on it. We need to be unified on it. And I hate to bring this in, but I think that's a key place where our leadership has failed us. We haven't been unified. And what happens when you're scared is you might unify with a few people that you know and that you trust, but you're a lot more likely to be every man for himself with all the other folks.
Now, to be fair, my take would be that we as a nation don't unify easily anyway. We never really have. If you just go back across history,
we need to be encouraged strongly.
We're very diverse. We tend to polarize, not just now, even though it's worse right now. So I think what you're saying is that it takes leadership to have one voice across parties and platforms, and religious leaders, as well as medical leaders, as well as political leaders, et cetera, to speak in a way that can overcome that tendency toward polarization would require a unified effort. Is that what you mean?
Yes. In fact, you remind me, I read an article, and I think it was in Wired, that talked about the concept of trust applied to government, and went through a bunch of case studies from a few other countries and pointed out the way in which, it wasn't this that helped them get through it better. It wasn't this that helped them get through it better. It was all down to trust. The government had earned and kept the trust of its people, so the people could rally together and do the things that were asked of them and follow all the voluntary guidelines and not kick up a fuss about the involuntary guidelines. And, and these are some of the countries that are seeing their levels go way, 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 way down at this point, because the people trusted the government to take care of it. And the government says, okay, we're going to maintain that trust. We're going to keep it up and make it real. Mm-hmm. And that was the one thing that at least this researcher and writer could really find that was the same among all the countries that did well and different than the States, at least, in this time.
And yet I think I'm right that there would be a couple of countries where that wouldn't be true. So, for example, Germany has done much better than we have. They have a universal masking policy, so everybody has to face mask. Germany tends to be a nation that's hard to unify, although there have been people, obviously, who've managed to do it. But it tends to be a culture that is hard to bring people together, and yet they did it. And I think what I read is that every leader just chose in the beginning to make a stand on this across all sorts of parties.
If they were able to have that unified voice and everybody out there in the populace was hearing that, then they're like, hey, you know what? That sounds like they're together on this. And that's a characteristic of being trustworthy, consistency.
So I have two questions that are sort of completely disparate, but this conversation is making me think of both of them. So I'll ask the first one and then I'll hopefully remember the second one.
It's a dialectic.
The first one, so when the point was made about like leaders and the language they use, right? And even just earlier in the conversation, and I know that this is something that's like in my brain, it gets clicked on reptilian wise. When we were making comparisons to drunk driving, right? So to be fair to a lot of people, they might be sitting there going, I'm not willingly walking out with the disease. So when you attack me like that and you make me think that I am just being a jerk that's walking around shedding fire all over the place, like come right, like so people are just immediately put off by almost being shamed, like, oh, you must be infected, as opposed to feeling like, and even secondhand smoke, like that's an act you're actively doing, right? So people will start to rationalize, look, if I'm not sick, that's one thing. If I am sick and I'm walking out of the house and I'm coughing all over the people and I'm not wearing a face mask, well, that I can understand. But if I'm not sick, right? And so then there's like this language around how does leadership speak in a way that it doesn't put people on that guard of going,
Defensive.
yeah, because for sure, for a second there I was kind of like drunk driving. I'm not sure how this compares.
Well, I wouldn't have made that comparison. It was just a fascinating article.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah. But it's an interesting one, right? Because I mean, seatbelts probably makes a little bit more of an interesting perspective, because the safety wise, people are going back and forth, and you're either actively, you don't actively get in a car accident, well, unless you're drunk driving, right? But so I think, and there's been other language or even language like if you cared about me, you would, right? So you're immediately putting someone on like, so you're saying I don't care. So you're just calling me heartless. So I have no feelings. I clearly am just a mean person who doesn't think about, right? So like you can see how people who are maybe already feeling, to your point, fearful about it, or thinking if I just put my head in the sand, I won't think about it, or just shutting down, whatever, so they don't have to think about it. But then the language that gets used, and we're seeing this in the racial tension language as well.
Yes.
That's being used, that it's not helpful, honestly. It's like, if you want to bring someone to believe it, the last thing you should do is probably make them feel like they need to go on the defense and protect themselves to say, I'm not a bad person, right?
Everybody hates a guilt trip. Even if they're not sure that that's what it is,
right?
They still don't like that
Sound
feeling.
of it is like,
and automatically defensive, and sometimes attack back.
Right.
And Jason and Aaron, I think this is a really good point, but I never get into that conversation. I usually try to use the science. The science is clear that some of the super spreaders have no symptoms. They have absolutely no symptoms. They don't know they have it. That's the overriding consideration. And to me, that's the only thing that, how can someone say, I don't care about that? Then they don't care. Then you just walk away from them. I mean, I would just steer clear, but I wouldn't get into the other things, because I think you'll have all those negative reactions.
Right.
You can't convince someone to suddenly have a change of heart. But if you tell them, gee whiz, I've read these studies, they came out of Harvard or whatever you're going to say, wherever it came from, and it shows very clearly that some of the people that have spread it never had symptoms. They test positive, they've tested their breath, they've tested their cough, and they've got far more viruses. They make these little aerosols all the time, worse than anybody else. So you don't know. And then what are they going to say to that, Jason? What
Barry, you've had how many years of practicing how to convince people to do the healthy thing, even if they don't feel like it?
Well,
and you have the advantage of that, the benefit of that. And so you've learned, hey, let me approach it in a way that's going to do this end run around people's defensiveness. And we should all be that wise. Honestly, we should.
Right.
I wish what you said also translated to, I was very successful in my practice. And
you were with me. You convinced me to. You convinced me with other things, but well, I believe the science like you do. But I will also say that your doctor you have a relationship with, so that's a person who becomes a compendium of that wisdom, and is able to pass it on to you in a way that makes sense to you. Well, my doctor said. Very few people go around and say, there's a study at Harvard said I should have lower cholesterol. My doctor said that. And it was my doctor. So that's what Jason's saying, I think, is we need those persons that we trust in this society. I think for some of us, somebody like an Anthony Fauci is that, but it's intriguing, Barry. Anthony Fauci is as hated by some as he is appreciated by many of us.
It breaks my heart. I know people that call him a liar.
Yeah.
Because of what happened with face masks. The CDC said none, and then the Surgeon General. But it's very sad. I think we've got to figure out. I think what I really think, if we could just go back in time, if we had from our leadership, from those daily sessions with Fauci, if our leaders had said these kinds of things. Well, we have super spreaders out there. There's no way to know. I'm going to be wearing a mask. I'm making sure everybody around me wears a mask. We don't know who has it. Instead, we heard things like, we're tested every day. We know we're okay. It's up to you. I mean, it's just was so counterproductive.
I mean, to be fair,
afraid of
Fauci,
running out of masks.
yeah, to be fair, Fauci wasn't on board with that. Or, I mean, the medical professionals weren't necessarily there either. So I agree with you that the key leadership was a buffoon. But there was also, like, I listened to the episode with Sanjay Gupta and Fauci when he reversed his opinion, and
Yeah.
he was fine with it. Was saying, "Yep, I've reversed my opinion, and we're now saying cloth masks are okay." And
Oh
all these
no, right.
yeah, so I think, I mean, even with you, we talked about it at the first episode of
Oh yeah.
Coronavirus. Like, we were like, nope, don't worry.
Well, it was only to protect you, for,
Yeah.
to sort of help people,
Right.
but we didn't know we didn't know
Right.
about the asymptomatic spreaders, and
Right.
we didn't know about the aerosol,
Right.
and we know a
Right.
lot more now.
So I
Another
remember
interesting-
my other question. Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I
No,
have
go
my
ahead.
other question because I thought the question around the government entrusting, leadership and things like that. So I've been on many listservs, one in specific in Falls Church City, because we've just gotten handed down what the school year is going to look like, right? So everyone's coming out with a lot of information. And one of the things I started to consider was, I think part, or at least this is my armchair expert, I think part of the challenge is that there are several social contracts that have been broken, so to speak, that are things that
Yes.
people have. So it's hard to go, like, school's not available to my children, which was something that, like, was a social contract. We just
Mhm.
expected that that is something that happens, and now it's just being taken away from us. But like, on the flip side, I'm being told that I should be following government for all these other things. But then this thing that's really super important to me, it's like it's okay that it's just that contract's been broken with me. And I feel like people are my thought is that people might be trying to constantly balance that of, like, there's so many things that I feel are being, or so many social contracts that are being broken with me right now, but yet I'm also being asked to really follow along with which ones seem to be the norm, right? And I don't know how to reconcile those two
That's
things.
a really good and fascinating point. Now, Jason, of course, has
Yeah.
no thoughts about school. With 3 children, this is no big issue for him.
All the time,
Yeah.
"Listen,
No,
what are you doing to me?"
you make a very astute observation there. I think that we have structured our lives around receiving certain kinds of services from the state. And one day they were taken away.
Mhm.
And in some cases, you got sort of a, maybe good enough substitute
Yeah.
and to replace that. And now they're saying, yeah, you know what? We're not even sure we're going to keep, we're not going to come back. We're going to come up with some other random plan. And it is very much something that undermines trust.
Yeah.
And is going to reduce my willingness to be really on board and sign me up about whatever else the state has got to
Right.
tell me.
Mhm.
And I
Right.
use state in that larger sense of
Sure.
government entities, because it's a relationship.
Right.
That's a very useful rubric to look at it with.
Yeah, I think that's
And-
really a good point. Let me share this one more time, and then let's hit one more thing really quickly, and then we need to log off. But I think we have to deal. So this is everybody again is AB. If you care, you will, and I really appreciate it. Are the prevailing responses of our viewers tonight, and that poll too. It's just been moving back and forth the whole time. So one final point. So what's interesting to me, and both sides have talked about this, is how politicized this has become. Of course, everything gets seen through this lens now. I think this political thing has become, if you're a hammer, everything's a nail. Let's fit it into these categories, because I don't think this one fits into those categories at all. But it has been made to fit in what has become a politically meaningful way. And that is to say that this has become an identity issue. Whether I wear a mask or whether I don't is a part of identity. I think in the same way, frankly, whether I believe in global warming or whether I don't is identity. By the way, this has also been theologized. There's a group of people that are saying this is a love your neighbor issue. This is an issue of social responsibility. This is a justice issue, like Aaron was saying earlier. And there is a group that is throwing out a theology that essentially says when you cover your face, it's idolatry, because you are covering the image of God, and you shouldn't do it. I think that's a justification of a theology. However, just to say, you can park this face mask thing in so many polarized camps. It's totally fascinating to me that it falls out this way. So I guess Jason, Barry, and I think Aaron, you're particularly good at thinking about these issues. How did this become an identity issue? And let's try to remove just the simple answer that a leader or a couple of leaders made it so. Let's pretend that we can't. I think that's the easy answer, but there's got to be more going on. And it may have to do with this social contract stuff. It may have to do with what we expect government's responsibility is, with what they should and should not be able to do. It may have lots to do, but I think this is going to be something we study for years to come, that this became an identity issue. How did it happen? So Jason, first you, how did it happen?
It goes back to in-group, out-group sociology. We're always trying to say, I'm in, I want to be in, I want to be in crowd. You know, you remember that, right? Back in middle school, that all started, and it doesn't stop. It just keeps going, and sometimes it gets really bad because we all want to feel belong. We all want to feel in. And hey, wouldn't it be great if there was this really easy way to tell who was in and who was out? Oh, well, hey, see if they got a mask on or not, you know? And so you adopt that. You say, oh, this is a great flag, you know? I mean, the one article that you point out from National Geographic, they referenced virtue signaling,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep.
And the thing is, some people will look at that and say, oh, that signals to me that this is a virtuous person trying to be kind and protect everybody from their germs. And other people will look at that and say, oh, you know, this is one of those people that is, you know, following this thing or following that thing. They'll look at the same person as a good person or as a bad person. Either saying, oh, they're a part of my tribe, or, oh, they're a part of the other tribe, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all about, I just want to feel like I belong and I'm in and that's safe for me. And
Helpful. Barry, what would you say?
Well, I have a little different spin. I think it's mixed messages. I think if you're training your children, or if you have a puppy, like we have a puppy right now, you're training a puppy, you don't send mixed messages. And when you get mixed messages, who knows what can happen? I mean, you have a lot more variability in what the outcome might be. And I think we got just a lot of mixed messages. We got some messages that said it was just the most severe thing around. This is going to be another pandemic. We had people that said that. We had other people that said it's nothing, don't worry about it. And then as we went through the first few weeks and then the first few months, the mixed messages just kept coming. And when you get all that, it opens up lots more possibilities than if we got a clear message. If these people in power, or the messengers, or if they somehow could have gotten together, I think we would have a very different or somewhat different outcome right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's pretty bad right now. I can't even believe
It really is.
I cannot believe. I've stopped watching the news pretty much, except since my daughter's in Houston, I watch to see what's going on there with the hospitals, and she and her husband and the kids, the grandchildren. But I just can't believe it. You sit there, and I don't watch the whole thing because I just can't take it. I don't. People are just like, it's irrational at such a high level for humans to act that way under the circumstances. How can you not believe the hospitals are full of people and there are no more ventilators available and no more ICU beds, and you go to a place and party, you have parties, you invite your friends over, you don't social distance, you don't wear masks. I don't get it.
Not going to happen to me. Just like death, nobody thinks they're going to die either.
Yeah.
We're amazing at denial.
Well, I wonder what you think, Jim, or what do you think?
Well, let's get Aaron first. Aaron's really, I love the way Aaron thinks about these issues. And so I know you've been thinking about this one.
My first instinct is to say the very obvious answer, which is it's so identifying. Like there's no way to not have an opinion. Like you immediately are either wearing a mask or not. So it's
obvious. Yeah.
It's an easy shot for people to take. Being someone that does not ever like really being categorized in one camp or another and rides a line often on all topics. I think I I don't actually feel specifically one way or another. I feel angry that I have to think about it. You know what I mean? Like I get more annoyed that that it, like, one way or another it says something about me, because in my mind it doesn't say much of anything about
Hmm.
me. And it feels like such an, like, normally I get to walk around and people don't get to make immediate judgments of me. There's not normally big things. And granted, again, having the race discussion and being a female, we can have those other discussions about what other identity things people can assume by just looking at you. But on an average everyday basis, most, especially white individuals, especially white males, don't have to think immediately what this might say about them. And so the idea that I have to think about what this thing will say about me immediately has then transferred on to how I might think about the rest of people. So to me, that would probably be, I think that's probably how it started for everyone. Is like all of a sudden it became like this thing, and it was very visible and it was very identifiable, and it immediately meant something
Yeah.
one way or another. And
Yeah.
so then you just
That's
start
good.
getting to the in group, out group, I guess, but also just like your own defensiveness, or I'm going to make a statement. You get into that mode.
That's good. I mean, I agree with all of you in a way. First of all, I think we could do a whole other show on this. This is so fascinating to me.
I'm
I
ready.
think it is one of the most intriguing lenses into our culture right now, and into the world's culture. I think it has to do with the particular message that people are trying to send based on their tribal identity, as Jason said, or do they choose their tribal identity based on the message they're trying to send? So I think a person who says, I'm going to wear a mask, is saying not only I want to protect myself and protect others, they're also saying I want to be seen as someone who protects others. This is how I want to be viewed. And I think there's another side, another group, we won't call it a side, that want to be seen as bold. They want to be seen as brave and courageous, and people who can take on the world and conquer it. And they want to be seen as optimistic in a particular kind of way. And so that virtue signaling, Jason, to me, it depends on the message a person wants to send. I think it's no surprise that a much lower percentage of men are wearing face masks than women. So women stereotypically and typically are more nurturing, and perhaps because of mothering and other things are more concerned about others. I think men, we have been taught and socialized to be bold. We've been socialized to be courageous leaders who fear nothing. And when we put that mask on, I think for a lot of people, it's a sign that if I do that, I am afraid, and I'm unwilling to be afraid. Now, Jason, it goes back to a lot of that original stuff you said, but I think it has to do with what we perceive we're saying when we put a mask on our face. And I
Yeah,
also
but there's
think we
also
could
variations of,
talk about this all
yeah.
day.
Yeah, I mean, because there are people, right? Then there's other people who will wear a mask everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Versus, like in Falls Church City, for sure, I don't wear a mask outside, but so maybe that's seen as me being bravado. But then when I go into a store, I'm like, oh, of course, that's what's required, and
Yeah.
that's respectful. So I'm going to put the mask on, and I'll go in there. And then the minute I get out, I'm the one that's like removing it as I'm walking out the door. But like, so I don't know. That's like mixed messages. Like, I guess half the time when you're,
I don't think it is, because the
you know,
danger is far
yeah,
less outside.
yeah,
And you're at more of a distance.
right,
If you're walking around Harris Teeter, the Isles of Harris
right,
Teeter, you're much more of a danger, and people are much more of a
right,
danger to you with the
right,
virus.
right.
Yeah, it's just
Fascinating.
it's just really fascinating. I do think, in our culture, when because we have not lived in Asia now. Marley tells me that when she was in China, everyone masked
Yeah.
because SARS had, that was the culture.
One small.
It had become the cultural norm. Everybody did it. She did it too. But here we're not accustomed to seeing that. So who do I see in masks? I see either doctors and nurses, but they're in professional settings when they wear them. If they walked into a party wearing them, I would think them strange, unless it was a dress up party at Halloween. Okay, the people I see masking in our culture are people who are sick. They have a disease that makes them weak. And if I don't want to be perceived as weak, I don't want to be seen as someone who is weak. I want to be seen as strong. I'm afraid that I'm sending a message that I am sick or that I am weak. And I think there is a certain segment of the population that's how they feel when they put that thing on. We could do a whole nother show, Jason, about how we overcome this in our culture. There is a way to do it. Stigma, making it universal so that there's no stigma. We all have to do it. That would be the policy piece. But changing the messaging and changing what we're saying when we wear a mask. And some people do that by wearing, I saw a guy the other day with a mask that was skull and crossbones and looked really spooky. Clearly he wanted to send a particular message. I'm wearing a mask, but I'll also kick your rear. Whatever the case may be, it would be intriguing to talk about how we overcome it.
I think the
There's-
next one's going to be schools, Jason. The next one we're going to talk school.
Yeah, well,
I'll let you guys talk. I'm past that point. So, man, I was thinking the other day, I really feel for you guys who have little kids. And
Yeah.
Barry, aren't you glad you don't have kids in school right now?
Oh, what I said, just I have grandchildren, so I worry about them. They're
Yeah.
in, they're all in school. So, and Jason, you've got 3, and I don't know how many you have, Aaron. It's at least 2. That's a big
2.
number. They're all big numbers, and so it's a tremendous challenge for parents as you sit and wait, and you to determine or figure out or see what's going to happen.
Okay, we'll come back and talk about that one. We'll do it as a show. Barry can come
about
talk
to get-
about
Over.
why, if children aren't as threatened, why it's still important to protect children. You can talk about that one next time, Barry.
Okay, I'm
We'll
ready.
bring Jason back to commiserate with Aaron about having his kids out of school, and then to talk about we'll talk about all that too.
Yeah.
Great guests. You guys are awesome. This is a fun conversation, which
Enjoyed
is
it.
why we're 12 minutes over.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was definitely fun.
It
Yeah.
was fun. Thank you guys so much. We
Thank
better
you.
say goodbye before everybody gets impatient with us.
My
So-
dog's even starting to growl. So
Yeah, my stomach's starting to growl. Thanks for being at Soul Cafe, everyone, and pray about these things. Really, pray about what the church's message should be in this, and what our theology of this is, and how we should handle it. And let's be leaders in the midst of this. So have a great week, and we'll see you Sunday or next time on Soul Cafe. Bye, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, bye.